Hello, welcome to the video. I've been thinking about this video for quite a while and I wasn't quite sure how to pitch it and decided in the end that what I wanted to do is to talk about classical music, but classical music that would appeal to rock fans. So don't go away, I'm going to make some rock references as we go through, but I'm going to kind of try and describe I'm going to talk about maybe 10 or so brilliant examples of classical music that, with a bit of effort, will really appeal to the rock fan. So let's start by a little bit of background, I think. What do we like about rock music? Those of us who are into rock music, we kind of like the dynamics, we like the rhythm, we like a sense of movement, we want excitement. We want music to grab our attention, music that can't be ignored. And one of the problems with classical music, I think, to the average music consumer, is that it's become like wallpaper. You know, they play it in shopping malls, or it's on when you're hanging on to a call center on the phone, they're playing it in the background sometimes if they aren't playing ABBA covers. And it's become just like wallpaper, and you kind of think, well, why would I want to investigate this stuff? Because it's kind of bland. But classical music is anything but bland when you really get into it. What got me into classical music? Well, like everybody who was into rock music, particularly in the early 70s, one of the albums that we ended up buying was this one. Very famous one. Pictures at an Exhibition by Emerson, Lake and Palmer. Now this was based, I didn't really know at the time, but it was an ELP album, so I thought I'll have it. But this is based on Mussorgsky, the Russian composer, and it really is a pretty faithful version of the suite. And one of the reasons why I bought this is because it was cheap. This was a budget release. I don't know how much it cost at the time, I can't remember, but it was a budget release, and so ideal for the young record collector. So, of course, inspired by classical music. So it got me thinking about, well, there must be something more out there, and then I realized that there were more bands who were doing something similar. This is an example of another one, which is kind of just play as an excerpt. This is the Yes Songs live album by Yes. This has an opening from Stravinsky's Firebird Suite. It doesn't do it justice because it's through the PA. It sounds much better than it does on this album. But the bands that I was really interested in were doing something with classical music. So I thought I need to get into this a little bit more, and I ended up buying this box set, which is called Gateway to the Classics. 10 LP box set that goes through all the kind of classical music genres, if you like, from the Baroque and the Romantic stuff and so on. And it's a bit light on the 20th century composers. But it allowed me to dig in and begin to learn to differentiate between different types of classical music. And I kind of settled into this idea that what really appealed to me was the stuff that made me excited about rock music, which was about the excitement and the drive and the attention grabbing. So I've kind of gravitated over the years to the stuff that provides all of that and a really big sound. Now that doesn't mean to say I can't appreciate the quieter stuff like the Chopin preludes and piano pieces by Beethoven, or classical guitar. Even some choral, but it's the big stuff that really that's grabbed my attention, has kept me interested in classical music. So I thought, kind of what I would do is basically just give some hints as to where you would start if you're a rock music fan, particularly with a penchant for progressive rock. Where would you go rather than just buy a modern day CD version of Gateway to the Classics, which will have small excerpts on it, which none of which will be ultimately satisfying. So I'm going to go through my top 10. So number 10 is Stravinsky's The Firebird Suite. Now, Stravinsky, Russian, moved to America, I understand, created, very famous for his kind of ballet music. This was one of them, The Firebird, by the London Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Claudio Abbado. Why do I like this? It's very, very ethereal. It's very, very melodic, and it kind of, the melodies kind of emerge. It's only a 30-minute piece, so it's not a full symphony, and it basically goes through these very, very kind of gentle emerging melodies up to the point there's a dramatic section in the middle where it's really quite startling, particularly on my favorite version, which was this one by Eduardo Matter and the Dallas Symphony Orchestra. This one's it's a little bit less detailed in the sounds than the Abbado version, but this one is just beautifully dramatic. And there's a final melody in the whole piece that's very familiar for those in the UK who listen to Alan Freeman's Saturday Rock Show. It's really quite gorgeous. Last word on this one, why I particularly like this version, is that it's got some off-stage sounds that bring it atmospheres, like a door closing here and there and furniture being moved around in the background. It's really hard to hear, but you can tell it's being recorded in a live space, and there's something going on backstage that's making the noise, but it's really brilliant. So that's number 10. So Stravinsky's The Firebird Suite. Number 9 is possibly the most famous piece of classical music ever. Maybe. It's this one. It's Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. Da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, the stuff that we're all familiar with. This is commonly recognized as the best version by Carlos Kleiber and the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra. Worth saying something here. There are hundreds of versions of this and most of these around in the catalogue. You can still buy them on CD, or you can stream them. Still buy them on vinyl if you wish. There's hundreds of versions. But the more you listen, the more effort you put into classical music, the more you begin to differentiate between the different types of performance. And this particular performance is truly committed. You get a real sense that the conductor has an iron grip on the orchestra, and the orchestra is playing its ass off, really, really giving it absolutely everything. So it's full of gorgeous melodies, the dramatic opening, of course, but it really is on fire, this version. It's amazing. Kleiber didn't do much apparently, but he did a version of Beethoven's Seventh, which I'm not going to talk about, which is equally regarded as one of the best. Beethoven's a master, of course, as we all know, but that is a fantastic version to get a hold of, and cheap as chips, like a lot of this stuff on CD these days. Classical box sets, there are any number of them. You'll pick up a box set of, say, Herbert von Karajan's performances. It might have 100 CDs in it. You'll pick it up for about 80 quid or something. Amazing value. So if you're interested in classical music, now is the time to really dig in. Number 8, it's a real cop-out here, I'm afraid. I couldn't decide on a single piece of music, so I've gone for a box set by this composer, Gustav Mahler. German, 10 symphonies, 9 famous ones and one that was kind of unfinished. I think it was just the Adagio from Symphony number 10. What do I think about this? This version here by Kubelik is commonly regarded as a very, very safe bet. There's also a collection by Solti, S-O-L-T-I, the conductor. That's definitely great as well, possibly even more dramatic than this one, but this is great. A couple of things to kind of pick out here. The first symphony is amazing. Titan, it's called. For a first symphony, it sounds very, very mature. The second has a very famous choral piece that was made famous by what's his name? Geez, I've got his stuff all over here. Where are we? How? Yeah, Simon Rattle. Yeah, anyway, so there you go. So you occasionally forget these things. Right, Simon Rattle with the Birmingham Symphony Orchestra, City of Birmingham Symphony, CBSO. Very famous version. The third is a favorite from mine. It's a long piece. Almost all of these symphonies are massively long, so it's a real investment of time and energy to get into Mahler. I think Woody Allen was a big fan as well, so he made some of his stuff famous, as well as the Gershwin that he was famous for. Anyway, yeah, third's good. The fifth has got a very famous adagio, the slow movement, which is very melodic and dramatic. It was used in Death in Venice, the film, made famous there. That's the fifth. The seventh is great big swings in the music there, very, very full of drama. The eighth is amazing. It's not as accessible as some of the others, but it's huge. I once saw a performance of it at Birmingham Symphony Hall only a few years ago, and there must have been one moment or one period during the long symphony where my mind was beginning to wander, and I started counting the number of musicians on stage, and I'm convinced there was about 200 musicians on stage, including the choir. But it's absolutely massive. The ninth is very mournful. Some discussion. Some stories around. Apparently, Mahler knew he was on the way out, and so this was a kind of almost like something about getting some of the emotions associated with illness and death out into his music. Really quite beautiful, really good. But Mahler is a whole musical career in itself, so that's a great big box set because I can't decide on one. Sorry for the cop out. Right, where are we? I've got a list here. Number 7. Beethoven again. The Ninth Symphony. Now, we all know this. This is the one which has the famous Ode to Joy. European Union watchers know that that was the theme they adopted for the European Union. This particular version is different from many, many of the others, by a conductor called Leopold Stokowski. Very famous for messing with the score, rearranging or repositioning members of the orchestra, bigging up the brass and percussion. So his stuff's very, very dramatic and sounds quite a bit different from other versions of the music that he covered. But this is absolutely jam-packed with amazing melodies. It's great. It's a fantastic piece of music. Yeah, you can't go wrong with this. If you've got an interest in classical music, this is not just in my top 10, this would be in anybody's top 10. Right, that was number 7. Number 6, I'm going to return to Stravinsky. This one by Herbert von Karajan. This is a version of The Rite of Spring. Now, apparently the story behind this is that when Stravinsky premiered this, members of the audience hissed and booed and walked out of the theatre. It was so dissonant. There's not much melody going on in here, but still it's compelling. It reminds me of listening to The Gates of Delirium by Yes, that midsection, or anything by John Coltrane in the 1960s, where he was exploring the outer edges of free jazz. Very light on melody, big on drama. So it's, cutting strings. It's it's not background music like classical music. You wouldn't hear this in a shopping centre when you're going shopping. But it's full of drama, really, really worth grabbing and exploring. Again, multiple versions of this around. This is a particularly good one that I like. Number 5 is often sniffed upon by classical music journalists as being too popular, but this is Gustav Holst's The Planets. And remember, this is about trying to appeal to rock fans. This is trying to steer people in the direction of stuff that's going to be that's going to resonate. Very, very famous piece of music, or more pieces of music here, little vignettes. We've got Jupiter, of course, which was made famous. Oh my goodness me! There's a version here, by the way, by Sir Adrian Boult. Sounds a bit dated now, late 50s, early 60s, but that's considered to be one of the best ones. This is the one I particularly like, the Steinberg version. Yeah, so Jupiter goes through all of the planets, including Pluto. I think, does it go through Pluto? Maybe it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Anyway, should know that. Yeah, so Jupiter got beautiful melody, made famous in rock circles by Manfred Mann's Earth Band, who did a version that included the theme within their single called Joybringer. So Jupiter, the bringer of jollity, they call it. Mars is very menacing, and lots of rock bands have explored the themes in there. Saturn, big drama, building to climaxes and then falling again and building to another climax. Really, really loud. This is very, very satisfying. Some of the other pieces are a little bit quieter, but really a whole mixture on this album. As I say, multiple versions there. That's the one that a lot of people stand by but prefer, but this is the one that is my favorite, the Steinberg version. Right, returning to... Oh, right. I thought I was going to go back into one of my... a different composer, but I'm not. I'm getting mixed up. So here's my number 4. This one's a bit trickier. Bear with me. Here we go. The Ring of the Nibelung by Richard Wagner. Now this lasts 4 kind of operas, but don't get frightened by the operas. Wagner kind of wrote several operas, but really there were... he's had a phrase for them, like a musical drama or something like that. It's probably the wrong phrase, but it was something like that. Very big on orchestra, so you can kind of ignore the words because they're sung in German anyway. And if you're English speaking, it's unless you study the libretto, you're not really going to get into it too much. So why The Ring? Well, I think this is possibly the greatest piece of art done by a human being in human history. Human history? Yeah, you know what I mean. Greatest piece of art in human history. It's massive. Lasts about 16 or 17 hours. If you go and see it live, you'll go on 4 different nights, and the operas will be lasting 3 or 4 hours. This guy Wagner invented film music, believe it or not. So within this piece in particular, this piece in particular, he has what are called musical motifs. So he depicts a mood or a character by a musical phrase, and it takes a while to decipher it, but you can the music follows the drama. So it's like, when you're watching a movie, then there'll be some dramatic music when the action's dramatic. It'll be menacing if the action's menacing. So it's all started here, as far as I can tell. I sat with a version of this. This version is by Herbert von Karajan. There's this is a rather beautiful, it's beautifully orchestrated version. There's a rather more dramatic version by Georges Solti again. That's around, definitely worth getting. But I sat with the first piece in this, Das Rheingold, the Rheingold, for about 20 years in my collection. I'd dip into it and I'd listen to the first half an hour and I just wouldn't get it. I'd take it off the turntable or off the CD player. But then one day I sat through it and I began to get it. And then I became a Wagner obsessive for several years, trying to see whatever performances I could get to see. But this is a desert island disc. So if someone ever asks you what record will you take to a desert island, you take this 14 LP box set with you, and you would sit and listen to it and find something new in it every time you played it. Now this is a really heavy box set, a vinyl box set. You might not want to go with that. So there's the same box set on CD. So you can pick this up for about £30. Well worth getting. It is fantastic. There are multiple versions around of The Ring. Some of them, there's 1 or 2 of them that are really cheap, that just keep getting released on cheap labels. They're still good. So yeah, Wagner, fantastic. The Ring, a true desert island disc. So where do I go to now? Number 3, Tchaikovsky, Russian Tchaikovsky. Another sad and mournful piece. It starts quite quietly. It has a big drama in the first movement, but then it kind of almost, I mean, this is not much of a recommendation, but it kind of sounds like he's wallowing in self-pity. I believe the story is that he was dying from syphilis or something like that, and he knew he was on the way out. But this is the melodies here are sublime. It's very, very sad and mournful all the way through, but it's just amazing. It's really, really beautiful. Again, multiple versions of this in rock circles. The Nice did a version. This is the one where the performance on the Firebird Suite, where they did with an orchestra. Keith Emerson, of course, of Emerson, Lake and Palmer. The band he was in beforehand. But they did a version of the melody as well. The third movement, I believe it is, in this version. But the whole piece is absolutely magnificent. It's gorgeous, gorgeous music. Definitely worth seeking out. So that's number 3 in my recommendations, my top 10 recommendations. Number 2, as I'm returning to the master of scale, the big guy again, Wagner, for this one. Tristan and Isolde. This is an absolutely astonishing piece of music. I discussed it in my prog introduction. This is like... it reminds me, when I think about the rock connections, a little bit like Genesis, Supper's Ready. Now, what is it about Supper's Ready and this that's in common? Well, if you're familiar with Supper's Ready, you will know that it goes on for about 23 minutes, 24 minutes. And it's broken into many, many different sections. And it seems to jump from one piece of music, one kind of theme to another. And before, there's this really dramatic piece just before the end. And then it reaches this beautiful climax where you have Steve Hackett's guitar coming in, and the whole piece kind of resolves really amazingly. It's beautiful. It's a fantastic piece of rock music. This is the long version of that. This music is about 4 hours worth of music, 3 acts. The first act is the prelude. It opens quite. It starts with the prelude, of course. It opens quite quietly. It has what the critics or the music experts talk about as the Tristan chord. It's this chord of music that, when you listen to music, pop music, rock music, classical music, you end up with a series of notes and chords that kind of they build, they ebb and flow, and then they kind of resolve. It feels very satisfying, and then the music moves on to another piece. And so you've got the verse, chorus, the midsection or whatever, and then the final ending of a piece of music, and it's all very satisfying, ebbs and flows, and very satisfying. This one deliberately keeps the tension going for 4 hours, so nothing resolves in this piece. Nothing feels really satisfying and enjoyable, which is really strange considering it's my number 2, until the end. But the ending is devastating. It's the Liebestod, the love-death scene, where you have this Isolde singing at the very end, and it just goes higher and higher and higher, and then it finally resolves. It's just astonishing. When I was searching out performances by Wagner, literally all over Europe, I thought, I'm just going to see this damn opera, whatever it takes. And I ended up taking my other half, and she and I went to Vienna for a second time for a weekend, ostensibly to see this opera. It was absolutely amazing. It was a modern version, so it wasn't kind of all flowing ball gowns and things like that, or men dressed as knights. It was kind of modern, but it was just amazing. What a fantastic trip and an amazing piece of music. This, in my judgment, is the greatest piece of music ever written. And not the greatest piece of art, because that goes to the ring, because it's sheer duration and scale and creativity, but this is a fantastic piece of music. So this is a version by Leonard Bernstein. It's considered to be rather slow, so it goes on even longer if you can stomach that. But very beautiful, very satisfying. A version that I kind of recommend to people is a much earlier version from the 1950s by Furtwängler. This one has some very, very famous singers on it. The audio is not quite as pristine as you can imagine in the more modern recording, but it's beautiful. It's very, very satisfying indeed. So that's number 2. Are you still with me, rock fans? I'm not sure. Maybe you're not. If you are, thanks for staying the course. The most satisfying classical piece of rock music, classical music for rock fans, in my judgment, it's this one. It's amazing. It's Camille Saint-Saëns, the French composer, called the French Beethoven, and his 3rd symphony, which has got the subtitle Organ. So organ appears here. This 4 movements. It starts, it kind of goes, it ebbs and flows, goes all over the place in the first movement. You kind of think, well, where's this going? Where there's no real themes emerging here. And it's kind of, you're waiting for something to happen, and it just goes up and down and up and down. And then it goes into a quiet second movement, which is kind of the adagio slow movement. And then the organ appears, and it appears very surreptitiously, is that the right word? But it's way low down in the mix, it's not in the mix, in the low bass notes. You kind of just feel it when you turn it up, play this loud. You kind of feel it rumbling and way down at the bottom, and it's got some really beautiful melody in the strings. And you think, oh, this is really quite pleasant. And then it switches into the 3rd movement, which is all urgency. It's kind of all over the place. And then about halfway through, or towards the end of the 3rd movement, it starts to kind of build towards something, and you're not quite sure what's coming. And then it goes, and then it just goes silent. And then you've got the 4th movement, which always makes me laugh, is that you've got these huge crashing chords of the organ coming in, and it blows your socks off. It's absolutely, I mean, I often played this to people when I was younger. Put the lights down low, turn the volume, say, you gotta hear this, and then the organ would come in and it would shake people out of the seats. It was amazing. And then the whole 4th movement is about building to an ever greater climax, and it's got a really famous melody in here. It was made famous by a pop song in the 1970s. I can't remember who was by. And the theme also appeared in the movie Babe, about that lovable little pig down in Australia. But yeah, beautiful melody, but then the organ just comes crashing in again and again and again, and ends up on this huge, I think they say it's a great C chord, but it's just absolutely fantastic. Very hard to get this right. This is the version that I recommend by Daniel Barenboim. The end, there's so much going on in the orchestra, with different sections of the orchestra playing bits and pieces, where very often what you hear is the players getting slightly out of sync, and it becomes kind of quite noisy. But Barenboim keeps this really under control, and everything seems to be in its right place. And then it's, as I say, it's beautifully satisfying. Yeah, fantastic. I think if you like drama in your rock, you like forward propulsion, you like dynamism, and you like beautiful melodies, and you like music that grabs your attention, this top 10 is going to satisfy you, and this particular one is really worth listening to. It's quite immediate, so the drama you get straight away, and the melodies are strong, and they become stronger and stronger the more you listen to it. So this idea of classical music being wallpaper, sound wallpaper in the background, doesn't apply to Saint-Saëns' 3rd Symphony. So that's the top 10. Just going to give a few mentions of stuff that's definitely worth considering as well. Brahms' 1st Symphony, brilliant version by von Karajan here. I think it steals a lot from Beethoven's 9th, but still really great. Emerson, Lake and Palmer, the original version, of course, Pictures and Exhibition. Actually, it's not the original, because the original, I think, was a piano piece that was orchestrated. Basically orchestrated by Ravel. But yeah, great. And Night on Bear Mountain is another piece which is super dramatic as well. That's great. Anybody who likes Hovis Bread, for those of us in the UK, will recognise the melody on the New World Symphony by Dvorak. Vaughan Williams, a pastoral symphony, which I think is about the aftermath of the First World War. Very, very somber, but really quite beautiful. And he did a fantastic piece, Fantasia, on a theme by Thomas Tallis, which is about 16 minutes of pure sublime music. A couple more. Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue by Bernstein, and West Side Story by Bernstein himself. Symphonic dances. This particular version is really worth seeking out because of the fact that it's got the West Side Story pieces in it as well. Again, amazing. Ravel's Bolero, Bernstein again did a version, and also Richard Strauss also Sprach Zarathustra. I can't even say that, but you know what it is. It's a very, very famous piece as well. And finally, a more modern piece, which kind of goes against all the drama that I've been suggesting and talking about during this video, is by the modern composer Max Richter. Now, this is amazing. This is, I think it lasts about 8 hours. I've forgotten how many CDs are in this. 8 CDs. But this kind of was written to play to an audience, or an imaginary audience. They did some live performances where the audience lay on mats or on beds with sleeping bags, and they were encouraged to fall asleep and wake up again. And this music is very, very ethereal. It's very, very relaxing. But for 8 hours, it's just so satisfying. It's really great piece of music. Richter is well worth seeking out. It's very different from everything else that I recommended in this video. But yeah, a modern composer, well worth checking out. So if you're still with me after all this time, I don't know how long it's taken. Thanks. If you're a rock fan and you're genuinely curious about classical music, I can say hand on heart, I am so pleased that I made the effort to get into classical music alongside my love of rock music, because it's become ever more satisfying the older I've got. And it's still cheap as chips. It's still cheap to acquire on some unbelievably fantastic performances. You can get the very best. Stuff used to be really expensive, but not anymore. So if you're curious, start with these 10 maybe. If not, you follow your own path. Been great for me. Hopefully for some of you out there it's been good as well. And I hope this video has helped those who remain curious. So thanks for watching. I'll be back with something else in due course. But appreciate you tuning in this time. And I'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.